achieved.
Hello Kamikaze Nation, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. On this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC Fight Night 26 Shogun vs. Sonnen event, which will take place on August 17th from the home of the Boston Bruins, the TD Garden in Boston, Mass. There are 6 main card fights, and for me, this is one of the most stacked cards in a long time. All this event is missing is a title fight headliner to make this one of the best cards of all time. But top to bottom, I am so excited for this card. As you can probably tell in my voice, I'm pretty amped up. And I'll get to my 6 main card predictions before but before that, I have a few things I want to touch upon. I'm coming up a pretty solid 9-3 event at UFC 163. Would have been 10-2 had Phil Davis not, stolen or Lyoto Machida been robbed of his decision victory. But 9-3, pretty solid night overall. I'm doing very well. My bet packs are right on the money, and they're available for $10 for this event, so please check them out at kamikazeoverdrive.net. They're doing exceptionally well. All of my preliminary picks will also be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Also, Kamikaze Overdrive Prediction Tournament. We're down to started with 32 competitors. We're in the third round. We're down to the final 8. This is the second event. Those 8 guys get their predictions into me. I post them all in the Kamikaze Overdrive Prediction Tournament page, so please check that out. Also, one final thing. I've started a rumors, updates, and news updates and speculation page on my website, so you can go and check out some rumors, some speculation that I might be making on my own, news updates like fight announcements, injuries, retirements, guys that get cut. You can check that out and keep up to date. It's all listed there. It's very simple. It's not like one of these websites, other major websites, where you have to go through miles and miles and miles of pages and info and updates. I keep it very simple and very easy to follow, so please check that out as well. Lots to get to. 6 fights. Let's get to the first prediction. We kick things off in the UFC's lightweight division as Joe Lauzon, 22-8-0, battles 13-8-0 Michael Johnson. Lauzon coming off an entertaining decision loss against Jim Miller, while Michael Johnson has dropped back-to-back fights. Now, Lauzon's fighting at home in Boston. He was very motivated last time we saw him. I believe it was against Gabe Rudiger, and he put him away in fine fashion. So I expect him to be very amped up for this fight as well. For Michael Johnson, Lauzon's a big step up in competition. He's easily the best guy Johnson has faced in his career so far. Overall, the biggest number that stands out to me in this fight is Johnson's 6 losses by submission. Reza Madadi, you look at the guys that have submitted him. Reza Madadi, 8 of his 13 wins by submission. James Krause, 13 of his 20 wins by submission. And Paul Sass, 12 of his 13 wins by submission. Those are the 3 main guys in UFC that tapped him out. And you look at Lauzon, of his 22 wins, 18 have come by sub, so it shows Lauzon's very much in the same category as the guys that typically beat Michael Johnson. Now, Lauzon, he's a BJJ brown belt. He averages 2.98 takedowns at 46%. He's very aggressive with his grappling. Now for Johnson, he's got a 74% takedown defense, which is pretty solid, but that number can be deceiving, as Reza Madadi went 4 for 6 and Miles Jury went 3 for 6 in both of those fights. And you look at Lauzon's done recently, he nailed 2 big takedowns against Jamie Varner, who's a very good wrestler. He had 4 versus Stout, so he's very capable of using takedowns to dominate an opponent. One thing I really like about Joe Lauzon, he seems to be maturing as a fighter. He's really coming a long way, and that's important because his cardio was a major issue before he'd go hard early and gas himself out. But in the bouts against both Jamie Varner and Jim Miller, he actually came on strong late, which is something that's not typical of J-Lo, so it's very important that he's fighting better and fighting a more consistent fight start to finish. Now, Lauzon has also been submitted 3 times in his career, but Johnson only has 2 sub wins overall, and I really don't see Michael Johnson being a threat on the mat against Lauzon whatsoever. On the other side of things, Lauzon's been knocked out 3 times, but you look at the guys that took him out: Anthony Pettis, Kenny Florian, and Jorge Masvidal. So Johnson is improving his striking, but he's certainly not on their level. And he is improving his striking. He knocked out Danny Castillo. We saw him beat Tony Ferguson with his stand-up. So he's getting better, but again, he's not on the level of a guy like Anthony Pettis or even Jorge Masvidal. He has good footwork, decent combinations, and he has some respectable power. Now, but one thing here, you look at strikes landed here. Joe Lauzon, 4.19 strikes landed per minute, which is an impressive number. And on the other side of things, Johnson, he lands 2.8 strikes per minute, but he gives up 2.33, so it's very close, and those are some tight numbers when you're giving up almost as many strikes to your opponent as you are landing. Now, Lauzon, he has solid striking, long straight punches. We saw him catch Melvin Glover with a straight jab and dropped him, eventually setting up the submission. He has a lot of high-level experience, which will help him out significantly in this fight. Johnson struggled with Reza Madadi, and he had no answer for Miles Jury defending the takedowns or when the fight got to the ground. That's going to be a huge issue here. I see him struggling again, so my prediction is Joe Lauzon to defeat Michael Johnson by submission. In the UFC's middleweight division, Uriah Primetime Hall 8-3-0 battles John Doomsday Howard 28-0. Hall's coming off his official promotional debut as an Ultimate Fighter final loss against Kelvin Gastelum, while John Howard has won 2 in a row and is 6-1 since being cut from the UFC in his original run. Now, as I said, this is Hall's first real step outside of the Ultimate Fighter, so it'll be interesting to see how he reacts. For Howard, 2 years away from the UFC, 6-1 in that run, 4 knockouts overall. For Hall, third opponent change, which could play a little bit of a few tricks with him, but, we'll see how he focuses in. Howard, he's fighting at home. He's from Boston, Mass., and that should help him to settle in and not feel too overwhelmed. Now, physically speaking, that's the first thing I want to touch upon. Hall's going to have a 5-inch height advantage and an 8.5-inch reach advantage, which is significant, and considering Howard formerly fought at welterweight, moving up to middleweight, and has been fighting at middleweight, it's not that big of a surprise. Hall is a fairly lengthy striker. Experience-wise, Doomsday has a big edge there. 28 total fights, 7 in the UFC versus Hall, just 10 pro fights and the 1 UFC bout. But Hall did have a one-fight stint in Bellator, which gives him some experience on the bigger show, and he fought some pretty high-level guys in middleweight champion Chris Weidman and Costa Philippou, so certainly he's fought some talented guys before. Now, Howard is a BJJ purple belt and a Muay Thai striker. 9 wins by knockout, 6 by submission, so he's a threat on both areas of the mat. Traditionally, Doomsday's wins have come, or UFC wins have come over grappling-based fighters, guys like Charlie Brenneman, Dennis Hallman, and Daniel Roberts. He lost to guys like Jake Ellenberger, Thiago Alves, and Matt Browne, more well-rounded and capable strikers who could match him or outdo him on the feet. He had a lot of trouble getting in the range against a very long Matt Browne, and again, you look at what Hall presents physically, and that could be something that Howard has trouble with. He likes to wing big power shots, and then not nearly as technical, and that could be part of his issue with closing the distance. He struggled with the speed and leg kicks and counters Thiago Alves, which I expect to see a lot of coming out of Uriah Hall, and I think that's going to be an issue again for Howard as well. He continued, every time he threw a leg kick in that fight, which is something he likes to do as a Muay Thai striker, he was getting countered with a straight right, and again, Hall should be looking for that in this fight. Now, Howard will shoot for a takedown, but again, he's not the greatest wrestler, so I don't expect him to have a lot of success in this bout getting Hall to the mat. Now, Hall, he's got a Muay Thai and karate background. He's a very dangerous counter striker. He's fast, good reactions, but he's almost a borderline point fighter. He'll look for the knockout, but he stand back and pick guys apart and not be too aggressive. He has excellent head movement and footwork. He can punch while going backwards, which should come into play against an aggressive striker like Howard. Lots of feints, again, to set up his counterattacks, which is important. I really like the way he uses a push kick to maintain distance, and of course we've seen his spinning kicks and the knees, and everything he can do with his legs is very impressive. I felt he was a little bit overhyped going into the finals and a little bit too confident, and that cost him in his performance. He did struggle a little bit with the pressure of Gastelum, and he has good takedown defense overall, but we did see him taken out a couple of times. If there is one major problem with his defense, that's where it could be. On the other side of things, he showed some takedowns, some good trips, through a suplex, and even swept Gastelum from the top, which was quite impressive. Overall, I think the speed, size, reach, power, and technique of Uriah Hall is going to simply be too much for Doomsday Howard to overcome in this fight unless he can land that big fight-changing shot. I expect Hall will be looking to improve upon his debut performance, so my prediction is Uriah Hall to defeat John Doomsday Howard by decision. Fight number 3 on this card takes place in the welterweight division as Matt the Immortal Browne, 19-11-0, battles Mike Quicksand Pyle, 25-8-1, and these two guys are on significant rolls coming into this fight. Browne has won 5 in a row overall and 6 of his last 7, while Mike Pyle has won 4 in a row and 7 of his last 8, so some significantly impressive numbers for these veteran fighters. Physically, Pyle's going to be 1 inch taller. Browne's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage, so nothing too significant as we had in our last fight, but still worth noting. Both guys, I said, solid veteran fighters. Browne, 28 fights overall, 15 in the UFC. Pyle's got 34 fights, 11 in the UFC, and he's got a number of fights in other major organizations. Now, Browne, he's 10-0 in fights ended by knockout. Very impressive. Great chin, and he's capable of putting guys away. We saw him stop Jordan Mean and Mike Swick, and he's the only person to ever knock out Bellator's big welterweight in Douglas Lima. Pyle, on the other hand, 5-3 in fights ended by knockout, but he's got 3 knockout wins in a row. We saw him stop James Head with the knee and some punches. 1-punch knockout of Josh Neer, and he also put away Ricardo Funch, which was quite impressive. Now, Matt Browne, very aggressive, gritty fighter, durable as well. He can be hurt, though, even though he's never been stopped. We saw Jordan Mean drop him with a body shot. Browne is excellent in the clinch with that tie plum, and he has knees and elbows that are very, very filthy and can do a lot of damage. What he likes to refer to himself as, and it's a perfect explanation, he's a technical brawler. He likes to overwhelm his opponents, as we saw in that Jordan Mean fight. He lands 3.55 strikes per minute as opposed to giving up 2.35. So he does get hit a lot, but he hits back more. And he has some nice long punches which can stop guys from getting in their range. For Mike Pyle, he's pretty good power. It's developing. Good combinations. He can work those elbows in. He's good use of leg kicks as well. He's quite light on his feet, and he will also go to the tie clinch and knees, even though I would favor Browne in that position in this fight. We saw him get busted up a little bit by Josh Neer along the cage, and James Head had some success beating him up as well. And we saw Rick Story bully Mike Pyle early in that fight as well and do some serious damage in that fight. Actually, Pyle was dropped early in that bout by a big shot from Rick Story. On the feet, Pyle gives up an identical amount of hits at 2.56 as he absorbs. So that's not a trade-off you want to have against Matt Browne, who has the ability to tee off and do some serious damage. Again, Pyle was also overwhelmed in his Jake Ellenberger and Rory McDonald fights with strikes. He took some big shots and eventually folded up. On the mat, Mike Pyle is 16-4 in fights ended by submission. He's a BJJ brown belt. 1.71 takedowns at 30%. We saw him take down Rory twice, and he dominated John Hathaway with 5 takedowns and really controlled that fight, which was quite impressive. He's got a very offensive guard, really high guard. He likes to work those legs up. We saw him attack an armbar on Rick Story. He used, his guard work was pretty much the key to reversing that fight against Story. It was very impressive. For Browne, he has that notorious submission issues. He's been submitted 9 times in his career, 5 times in the UFC, but he does have pretty good takedown defense at 66%, so it could be tough for Pyle to get in a position to use that, even though Browne might take it to the ground and then have to fight, mind his P's and Q's. Browne on the ground, very aggressive guard. We saw him throw a triangle and an armbar up against Jordan Mean. He was very aggressive against Mike Swick as well. He really likes that Darce choke, which is something to keep an eye on as well. He averages 2.06 subs per 15 minutes and is quite aggressive, as I said, with his ground game. Now, Browne's cardio isn't elite. He's 2-2 overall in decisions, but he keeps moving forward. He actually has only gone the distance twice in his last 10 fights, so certainly that's something that could cause a problem if this fight goes deep, but he's still very aggressive. For Mike Pyle, I'd say he has the cardio advantage. He's 4-1 in decisions. He took some significant damage against Rick Story early, but came on strong late, which was part of the reason he won that fight. Pyle overall has had some trouble with pressured fighters, but we saw him KO both Neer and Head after getting off to having some trouble, and Story slowed down, which helped him get back into that. For Browne, he's going to keep moving forward. He might slow down a little bit, but he's very aggressive. He still needs to be very careful on the mat, but I think he gets the job done here. So my prediction is Matt Browne to defeat Mike Pyle by TKO. Fight number 4 goes down to the 135-pound guys as former WEC featherweight champion Uriah, the California kid Faber, 28-6-0, battles Iuri Alcantara at 27-4-0 with 1 no contest. Faber has won back-to-back bouts since losing his interim title bout against Renan Barão, while Alcantara is coming off a win, and prior to that he had a no contest against Pedro Nobre, which in all honesty should have been a victory for the Brazilian. Now, Alcantara, as I said, he's had 2 short but very dominant fights at 135 pounds, only totaling 4 minutes and 42 total minutes spent in the cage at 135 pounds, so he's relatively untested. For Faber, you look at the guys that have beat him: Renan Barão, Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo, Mike Browne. I keep screwing those names up, and they're on the same card of all things. But these are elite-level championship fighters. For Faber, fast hands. He's an unorthodox striker. Nice straight punches. Will throw some uppercuts, elbows, body shots, kicks, step knee. He does it all. He's working to striking with Dwayne Ludwig, and he's 7-2 overall with in fights that end by knockout, which is pretty impressive for a guy like him who's been fighting at such a high level. Alcantara's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage in this fight, though, and Faber has had trouble getting inside of guys like Barão and Aldo, who had a reach advantage and could maintain that distance. He also struggled with the speed of those fighters, but he did land some big shots against a very fast guy in Dominic Cruz. We did see Faber get tagged a little bit in the Scott Jorgensen fight when Jorgensen was putting his strikes together in combination, which is something to take into consideration against a fighter as talented as Alcantara. Alcantara's significant knockout power, 12 wins by KO. He holds a knockout win over Ricardo Lamas, which took place at 145. He has big hands with speed, good combinations, solid leg kicks, nice knees. He'll throw spinning stuff in like the spinning back fist he caught Michihiro Omagawa with. For Faber, on the mat, he's very strong. He's aggressive, excellent ground and pound, really likes to launch those elbows. He's a BJJ brown belt and an NCAA Division I wrestler. He's never been submitted in his career, and he has 16 wins by submission, so some big numbers on the ground. He has some significant names as well he's racked up submission wins over. He's the only guy to ever submit Rafael Sunsao, Brian Bowles, and Takeya Mizugaki, and on top of that, he's one of only 2 people to submit Scott Jorgensen and Ivan Menjivar, so 5 very impressive names he's tapped out. He works really well from the front headlock position and can switch to that high elbow guillotine, which is very dangerous, and he has a nasty back mount. 4 of his last 5 wins have come by rear naked choke, which is something to keep in mind as well. His numbers for takedowns aren't that impressive. 1.37 takedowns at 32%. So not what you'd expect from a typical wrestler coming out of alpha male, but still tolerable, and he gets the job done with them. 60% takedown defense, which is, that's noteworthy. He had 4 takedowns against Scotty Jorgensen, a very good wrestler in his own right, which is the most Faber's put up in quite a while. Now, Alcantara, he's a BJJ black belt, 12 wins by submission. He averages 1.98 takedowns at 88%, and we saw him put up 6 takedowns against Felipe Arantes, which is quite impressive, as Arantes was a very big 145er. On the other side of things, Alcantara, a 67% takedown defense, but Hawker Diaz did take him down 5 times on 10 attempts, and he struggled getting off his back against the much bigger fighter, was able to ground him in those fights. Ricardo Lamas is the only guy that Uriah Alcantara has faced who is an American-based wrestler, and Lamas was a very short fight, and Lamas only had 1 takedown attempt, which Alcantara was able to stuff. On the ground, Alcantara, submission attempts, reversals, transitions. We saw him, he tapped out Francisco Trinaldo, who is a massive lightweight who fought at middleweight on The Ultimate Fighter. He caught him with an arm bar, which is also a nasty move he has. We saw him catch Michihiro Omagawa and basically jack his arm up, almost tap him. And he also had Hawker Diaz in tight for a little while in that fight. Faber, as I said, no big takedown numbers. He's only gone four times, which is career high twice. And he struggled scoring takedowns against Eddie Wineland, Browne, and Dominic Cruz until Wineland tired. That was the one when he actually beat in that scenario. He tends to hold his hands a little bit low on the when he's striking too, when he's looking for takedowns. And he likes to attack from a still position, which if a fighter can read that and react, it makes it difficult for him to either get a takedown or attack with his hands. And he needs to be the faster fighter to be effective, and that could be an issue here. He will telegraph his takedowns if he shoots from a distance, and he's not known for laying on top of guys. He likes to be active, and that could get him in trouble against Alcantara, who's very dangerous off his back. Now, for Diaz, he had to clinch in and out-muscle Iuri, and it was still a struggle, and he had a significant size advantage. That won't be the case for Faber here. Alcantara has more power, more diverse striking, and he's equal or faster than Faber. And you look at these final numbers before we get the decision. Alcantara, 2.84 strikes landed per minute versus 2.62, which is not that significant. But Alcantara limits his opponents to only 1.6 strikes per minute, while Faber gives it 2.4. This is going to be a close fight, but I've got Uriah Alcantara pulling off the upset and defeating Uriah Faber by decision. Now time for our co-main event prediction of the evening. It's Alistair Overeem, 36-12-0 with 1 no contest, returns to action to face Travis Hoppa Browne, 14-1-1. Overeem coming off that come-from-behind defeat against Antonio Bigfoot Silva, while Travis Browne has picked up a victory in his last fight, a very quick one over Gabriel Gonzaga by knockout. Now, physically, 3 inches of height for Browne. He's a big man, 6'7", but Overeem's going to have the 2-inch reach advantage, so, both very big men regardless. Big knockout numbers for both guys. Browne, 10 of his wins by knockout, Overeem, 15 overall. Now, as far as chins are concerned, Browne did get knocked out by Antonio Silva. He was inhibited by that knee a little bit, and Silva packs a punch if he lands flush. Overeem found that out the hard way as well. He got knocked out by Silva. But overall, he's been knocked out 7 times in his career, so certainly a question about his chin if his opponent is able to test it, and Browne will be looking to do that. As I said, Overeem's chin and cardio issues are a major problem, especially if he slows down. He becomes easier to hit and easier to check his chin. Now, Overeem, he was a little bit overconfident. Actually, he was a lot of bit overconfident in his fight against Bigfoot. His hands were down, his chin was up, and that cost him in that fight. I picked Bigfoot for all those people who were on me. I thought something like that might transpire. But either way, I expect him to rebound from that fight. He's a K1 level champion. But one of the issues there, the smaller MMA gloves may create defensive issues where guys used to being able to have those big K1 gloves that help them defend and block shots. They find their way through in the MMA. Now, he changes levels well. He really has a nice jab, throws good combinations, big kicks. He's a very technically gifted striker. Strong in the clinch and brutal knees. We saw him do it against Brock Lesnar, and he can generate a lot of power in a short range, short space. Good speed, which is surprising for a big man, and distance management, excellent footwork and head movement. Bigfoot Silva was having a ton of trouble connecting early and getting in to land his shots. Now, Browne, he has above average speed for a heavyweight. He's actually very fleet of foot for a big man. Lots of movement. He's an unorthodox striker. He has good power combinations, and he'll throw some kicks as well. He has a tendency to hold his hands at his side and attack from some strange angles, which can give opponents some fits. But again, Overeem has seen so much in his striking career, I don't know if that'll have any impact, or at least negative impact on the Reem. Now, statistically, Overeem 3.6 strikes landed per minute versus 2.71 for Browne, and Overeem also has the edge in strikes absorbed per minute at 1.64 compared to 2.44 in those comparisons. Now, Browne, on the mat, BJJ purple belt, he's working to improve his ground game. He averages 2.29 takedowns at 78%. But Overeem on the other side, very dangerous, surprisingly with the submissions. 19-2 overall in fights ended by submission, and he has that guillotine. If Browne shoots for a takedown, he got to be careful not to stick his head in too deep. We saw Overeem defend takedown attempts against Bigfoot, and he actually reversed a very large and gifted BJJ black belt in Bigfoot Silva and threw him on the ground, and the guy has big ground and pound, which really can take a toll on his opponent. Alistair Overeem, he's hard to take off his feet in the clinch, and he could use takedowns and turn things around against Browne. We could see that happen if he elects to do that. I don't fully expect to see that, but you never know. I think the speed, technique, power, and experience are all going to be huge for Alistair Overeem in this fight. Browne really has never faced this good of a striker before. The last guy he fought was a decent striker, was Czech Congo, and he fought that fight to a draw. I think Browne has lots of holes in his game, especially that low guard he holds, that Silva was able to exploit, and Overeem should be as well. I expect Greg Jackson to try and create a game plan that focuses on testing Overeem's cardio and pushes that fight as far as it can into deep waters. I don't think it'll get there. My prediction is Alistair Overeem to defeat Travis Browne by knockout. Now for our main event prediction of the evening, we're in the UFC's 205-pound division as Mauricio Shogun Rua, 21-7-0, battles Chael P. Sonnen, 28-13-1. Rua is coming off a decision loss against Alexander Gustafsson. Prior to that, he defeated Brandon Vera via knockout. Chael Sonnen back-to-back losses in his last two fights against Jon Jones for the light heavyweight title and Anderson Silva for the middleweight title, both of those coming by TKO. Now, conditioning and war wounds are a major issue for Shogun Rua. It would appear that he is slowing down, and it costs his cardio. That's something to keep in mind here. Now, Shogun, he's a BJJ black belt. We saw him throw that knee bar up against Gustafsson. He has a decent submission game, but he actually only has one career submission victory, so to put that in perspective. Now, Shogun, he will use takedowns in his attack. We saw him land 4 against Brandon Vera and 5 against Dan Henderson, mainly when Dan Henderson started to slow down. On the other side of things, he's been taken down a lot in his career, 7 times by Mark Coleman, who's very gassed. Alexander Gustafsson most recently put him on his butt 6 times, and Jon Jones put him on his backside 3 times as well when he lost the title. Shogun, he likes to move forward. He's very aggressive, but he has a tendency to telegraph his right hand, which is his big power weapon. He wasn't setting it up against Alexander Gustafsson, and Gustafsson was able to use that for takedowns and to change levels and take advantage of things he knew that were coming. Shogun has big power, 18 wins by knockout, taking out guys like Chuck Liddell, Brandon Vera, Forrest Griffin, Lyoto Machida, and even Alistair Overeem back in Pride. He has a great leg-kicking arsenal if his knees hold up, which is a big question mark. This could also create some takedown opportunities for Sonnen if he likes to throw those kicks. Shogun needs to fight more technical in this bout. He's not nearly as effective when he brawls. He just wears himself out and creates openings. Now, Sonnen, he's an underrated striker. He kind of has a karate base to him. He comes forward very aggressively, and because his opponents are so focused on defending the takedowns, it makes Sonnen a more effective striker. Now, what Chael likes to do, though, he likes to drive through that power double. He's very strong in the clinch. He's an NCAA Division I wrestler and Olympic Greco-Roman wrestling alternate, which is very impressive. He averages 3.83 takedowns per fight at 60%, and you compare Shogun a 44% takedown defense, that's going to be a big question mark how that plays out. We saw Sonnen land 4 takedowns against Michael Bisping, even though he had some trouble in that fight. Also against Brian Stan, he landed 4 against a very strong Yushin Okami. He put up 3 against Anderson Silva in that first title fight, and 6 against Nate Marquardt in kind of a coming out party way back in the day. He has a dominant top game. He smothers opponents. He always stays active. Doesn't matter what he's doing. He's always trying to do something to keep the ref from standing it up. He has a decent submission game. He's been working with Vinny Magalesh, and we saw him submit Brian Stan most recently, his most recent stoppage. Sonnen is 16-1 in fights that go decision. That's how capable he is at just overwhelming an opponent. Maybe not putting them away versus Shogun 2-3, and that's, again, he's a good finisher, but if he has to go the distance, can he fight a solid fight, and will his cardio hold up? Sonnen, though, 4 losses by knockout and 8 by submission, so he's certainly, opponents can put him away. He will need to be very careful if he gets on top of Shogun that he does not get submitted. Now, Sonnen, he likes to break guys down, and I expect he should be able to exhaust Shogun with his pressure and top game. This is Sonnen's second try back at 205. And I don't think he's going to be as drained. And Shogun's not a huge light heavyweight either, which is something to take in consideration. Not like on Jon Jones' level by any stretch of the imagination. Is an in-shape Shogun going to show up? Does that actually exist? He's coming off an 8-month layoff. I don't know. He's been working with Freddie Roach in his striking. Again, is it a figment of our imagination, the in-shape Shogun? Most of his fights where he looks in shape, they end early. The fights where he doesn't, they go long, and that's what I expect here. Sonnen has only lost Anderson Silva or Jon Jones in his last 8 fights since mid-2009. And basically, the only people that have ever beat Anderson or Jon Jones in that same time frame are Matt Hamill and Chris Weidman. So keep that into the back of your minds. I expect Sonnen's going to be motivated by the new championship, the new champion at 185 pounds, because he's talked about going back down. I think he'll look to smash through Shogun and continue his quest for another title shot. And my prediction is Chael Sonnen to defeat Shogun Hua by decision. So those are my 6 main card predictions for this fantastic UFC Fight Night event. I'm really amped up for it. I know it was a longer show, and I apologize for that, but at the same time, I had a lot to say, a lot of things to contribute, and I hope you enjoyed listening. All of my preliminary picks will be available over at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Please check them out. The bet packs have been on fire lately. I've been on fire lately with my predictions. Hopefully, I'll keep it rolling. The Kamikaze Overdrive Prediction Tournament Round 3 is still underway, so check out those picks. Also, the rumor page, please check that out. We got a lot of fights ahead of us. As again, thank you very much for listening. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions.